What's going on, everybody? Aidan from Birds vs. Boys here, and it is good to be back off the bye week talking about Eagles football again. Huge game that's been circled on the calendar for NFL fans for quite some time at Lambeau Field, Monday Night Football against a great Packers team. It is the game of the week. We'll talk about it. Can't wait to preview that game again and talk about the rest of the NFL schedule, full slate again this weekend, and even talk trade deadline fallout. We'll do grades and everything like that. Exciting game, marquee game there on Monday night. We'll get into all of it. Before we do, I think we need to touch on the tragic story in the NFL today. Marshawn Kneeland, the defensive lineman for the Dallas Cowboys, passed away today at the age of 24. It was a very jarring story to read and hear about. The details of it are very jarring as well. For me personally, the announcement that the Cowboys put out for him when he passed away with his graphic, seeing a death announcement with a birth year in the 2000s was just a rip your heart out gut punch, especially for me. I consider myself young. To see that 2000 in his birth year and be even younger, again, just absolutely gut wrenching. It felt like he had so many chapters of life left to live. And it's just, again, just so jarring that he will never get to experience that. I know the premise of this show from its origination was birds versus boys, quote unquote, where you debate the opposition and the rival and the enemy. And in this case, for us, it would be the Cowboys. But a day like today, it all feels so minuscule to have a sports rivalry when something like that happens and when a family like his is impacted, and to lose a 20-something-year-old. And I think everybody who heard about this story, saw his passing, and read about it knows somebody who has gone through something similar. I know I personally have had somebody who's gone through something similar as Marshawn Kneeland. So it really, I think, hits home for everybody, not just Cowboys fans, not just football fans, but anybody who's come across this story. Incredibly tragic news. Again, we'll talk about all the football tonight. It's the point of the show is to cover the Eagles and preview the games and everything like that, but it just feels very minuscule compared to reading that the first thing this morning, that a 24-year-old passed away in the manner that he did. So prayers and thoughts with his family. And I know there were a lot of Cowboys fans who I do think the one thing that came from this, I saw a lot of people being like, today I'm going to check on my people. I'm going to check on my friends. I'm going to check on my family and just make sure they're doing okay. And I think that was a wonderful response from people to just, if you care about someone, to go ahead and check on them. And I think that was the response for a lot of people, which was good to see. Again, no real easy transition to just go into an Eagles game in the middle of a regular season as if it compares to the loss of life like that. It is the show, so we'll go through it. We'll talk about it. Eagles going to Green Bay. First game that it's going to feel like it's wintertime. We're talking 20s. The Eagles might be the only team where that actually benefits them instead of Green Bay, because everything we've seen from last year, when the going gets cold, when the going gets snowy, they just get behind that offensive line. I have something to nitpick with the Packers, and I'd be curious if their fans felt the same way as I do. I'd love to see in the comments how they feel about this team. I thought when they traded for Micah Parsons, that could have put them over the top, considering what the Eagles lost in the offseason, put them over the top of the Eagles. I think what I've seen this year is a team still bordering on being a contender. This may not matter when it comes down to Monday night, head squaring off mano a mano versus the Eagles. I still think they have a very good chance of winning that game, but I'm talking in the broader scale of things. What leads me to not truly believe in them as a contender, like I did at the preseason, was some of the comments that come out that make you think if they have the focus to be 1-0 every week. So they had comments coming out of the locker room about going undefeated earlier this year, and then they lost to the Cleveland Browns. And then this past week, Micah Parsons said, about the Panthers game that they had at home. You could think of this as a trap game maybe with the Eagles on deck next week, but you can't view it as a trap game. They're a good team. You can't be focused on Philadelphia maybe a week later. By admitting that the Eagles, you could be looking ahead to the Eagles and that the Panthers could be a trap game, that admits to me that it is a trap game, that you are not focused on the opponent ahead because you are in fact looking at who's behind them on the schedule. That resulted in a loss as well. So they have losses to the Browns. They have losses to the Panthers. They play down to inferior opponents, and they do so because when you talk to them in the locker room, it doesn't seem like they're focused on being 1-0 that Sunday. And they have this grandiose focus of being 17-0, of beating the Eagles 2 weeks from now, of making the Super Bowl, instead of focusing on the opponent at hand. And their offense comes out and it looks incredibly suspect in these games against teams. The Browns admittedly do have a good defense, but you're playing teams of lesser talent than you, and you're not finishing the job. Now, do I think that could impact them on Monday night? No, I think this is a game they'll absolutely be locked in for in a grand stage. But in the grander scheme of things, in the broader scheme of things, that impacts your seeding, so that maybe when you play the Eagles again down the line, you're having to play them in Philadelphia instead of at Lambeau. Maybe instead of the cold and 10 degrees and snow and the tundra that is Lambeau in January, you're playing at SoFi Stadium against the Rams because you didn't take care of business being 1-0 that week. So I think from a seeding point of view, these slip-ups that they have, and boy, did they have a slip-up last week against the Panthers, I think that could really cost them. Now, again, going and transitioning into this sole focus, a silo of one game against the Eagles, I don't think that can impact them. I think the Eagles will get their best shot. To me, this game comes down to one position group, and it's the same for both teams. This is an exciting one. For the Eagles, you get some shiny new toys on defense, on that defensive line. Good to have the guys back. Nolan Smith, his practice window was opened up. Brandon Graham, admittedly, I thought Brandon should have stayed retired because I thought he has done everything that he could for this city and there's nothing left to give, but he is back as well. He'll be playing for the first time. And the new man on campus, Jalen Phillips, the more I watch, the more I listen to his press conferences, the closer we get to game day, the more excited I am to see him in an Eagles uniform. I think he could have a tremendous impact from this team, similar to a former Miami Dolphin on the opposite side of the ball who was traded to the Eagles, Jay Ajayi, mid-season. So I'm really excited to see that new revamped defensive front, and it's the first time that you felt good about that edge rusher position since the beginning of the season. There's been some pops here or there. You were excited for year 2 of Jalix Hunt. When they brought Zadarius Smith in, that felt good because he was a solid veteran and they needed bodies there, but you haven't felt truly excited about this position considering what they lost at the end of last year. With the addition of Phillips, with the return of Nolan Smith, anchored by the depth that Brandon Graham should be able to give them if he's anything like he was last year, man, you start to be really excited about that unit. And the interior continues to play well. Jalen Carter has found his footing. Jordan Davis has been awesome. Moro Jomo as well. So now you're solidified in that defensive unit, and especially the defensive interior. It now feels like they are on solid ground. Jair Alexander, the former Packer who's going to be returning, another trade that the Eagles had made. Admittedly, I don't know how much he gives you. I don't know if I trust him at this point in his career more than I would trust Kaylee Ringo on the outside, to be totally honest with you. We'll see what he's got. Exciting if he gives you anything. To me, it reminds me of the Phillies bringing in David Robertson at the end of the year. Like, yeah, sure, we do need arms in the bullpen. Am I thinking that David Robertson was the piece that was going to put the Phillies over the top? No. And that's the exact same that I feel with the Eagles with Jair Alexander. If this were 3-4 years ago, I think you feel a lot different. But, it's exciting. It's something different. And we'll see if he has any extra energy given he's playing his former Packers team. I don't know how much he's going to play this week. I think snap count wise, you're going to see a lot more snaps for Jalen Phillips than you would be for Jair Alexander. I think Kaylee Ringo will get the opportunity again there at CB2. And then Michael Carter was the other player that the Eagles had traded for since the trade deadline occurred. And he's more of a slot guy. So I think the one thing that everybody's looking out for, aside from the new additions, is does that new addition in Carter push Cooper DeJean to play on the outside? To me, that's very matchup dependent. I'm okay with using him as a Swiss Army knife. At some point, the basketball analogy, sometimes position doesn't matter. Just put your 5 best players on the floor. Put your 5 best scorers of the basketball on a basketball court. For the Eagles, they may be getting to that point where if Cooper DeJean is better on the outside because it gives you more talent at the nickel and Carter, you might just have to do that. Again, feels like matchups, feels like depending on the week. We'll see what happens there. But it does feel exciting, right? Like we just feel so rejuvenated coming out of this bye week with all of the different pieces and injury guys returning and stuff like that. It's the first time that I feel a little bit more solidified in depth. I think I mentioned this on a previous show. I think from a 1 to 11 spot, starter-wise, on both sides of the ball, you feel pretty good about this team. But the difference between this team and a year ago, I felt at that time, was I didn't think this team was good from 22 to 53. As you make these additions, for instance, there's less snaps that you're now dependent on Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith. Now you have a 5-man edge rushing front that you're really excited about because you have Hunt and you have Smith. Now you got Jalen Phillips, who might be the best of them all, up there with Nolan Smith. Josh Uche's been playing well. If you get anything from Brandon Graham at this point, it's a bonus. So now you've gone from 2 guys, and you're 11 overall collectively on defense, pretty good, to feeling better about the 22 of 53 because you have depth behind those guys. That was the difference to me. You feel a little bit better now as they get healthier. On the other side of the ball, like I said, there's one position group for both teams it's the same that you care about. And for the Packers, it is the edge rusher position. It is the defensive line. It's Micah Parsons. I wanted Micah Parsons on this Eagles team so bad. I just did a rant about how good you feel about the edge rushers for the Eagles. I feel a whole of a hell lot better if Micah Parsons was playing for the Eagles on Monday night instead of the Packers. I think they've been phenomenal in how they've used him this year because he lines up as a rover anywhere. He's not even, you use edge rusher because they're rushing off the edge. We need to rename this. They are floating Micah Parsons around and allowing him to rush from the interior, allowing him to rush again from the edge, kind of blitz almost as he's lining up as a linebacker. The Eagles have done something similar, I noticed, with Josh Uche and even lining up Jalen Carter in different positions. But the most I see it is Micah Parsons. And I think it's a great use of his athleticism to just be like, hey, when the offense gets to the line, they got to figure out immediately where this guy is, and he could be on the field for 3 plays and line up in 3 different places. So I thought that's an excellent job by the Packers of getting return on investment, right, with this trade. And he's been an X factor. He had 3 sacks a few weeks ago against the Cardinals. It's the one that you're looking for the most because, again, I think the Eagles in the past have had success against him by not, I don't want to say trickeration, right? I think they were creative in their game plan against the Cowboys to kind of get him off balance, and he wants to go one speed, get to the quarterback, get home quickly. They kind of used that against him. When he was swinging for the fences, they were throwing off speed stuff. They were really good in their RPO game against the Cowboys when Michael was on that team to just force him to consider more than just getting to Jalen Hurts. We'll need more of that this week. They have had 2 weeks to prepare. It's the most confident that you've been in the Eagles offense so far this year in the past few weeks, especially against the Vikings throwing the ball. And then overall, I thought it was the most impressive offensive performance that they've had this season against the Giants. So how do you build on that? I'd like to see more and more RPO. I think the message got home. And I'm not taking credit as the fans, even though all of us were clamoring for this, but just getting different looks, right? Getting Jalen Hurts under center, kind of hoping that opens things up for Saquon Barkley as a runner. When it does, turn that into play action. When they're in empty sets, kind of spreading everybody out, making the opposing defenses cover the entirety of the field, not being, slow and deliberate in what you're doing so you can keep them off balance. They've been a lot better at that in the past 2 weeks. You're going to need it again when a player as talented as Micah Parsons is on the field. And across the front, they have an incredible defensive line. So when it's cold out there, are we going to be able to get behind that offensive line well, like we're used to, and really play some smash mouth football, especially in the second half? We shall see. The one point of concern, we talked about the offensive line, and I know I've brought up health earlier in the show, but Cam Jurgens did not practice as of recording this. So what happens there is it Brett Toth again. They opened the practice window for Willie Lampkin, who they had brought in from the Rams, but he actually had an injury and hadn't played yet. So which of those guys goes? I'm assuming Brett Toth if Cam Jurgens doesn't go. I know we all want Jurgens back on the field. A little concerning that he had the Sunday off against the Giants because of an injury. You had the bye week, and it still doesn't feel like he's ready. Trending towards not being ready for this game, it feels, and then you're putting it in like a month until he's back. You're almost teetering on an IR situation. So that's something to monitor beyond how tenacious this Packers front is. It's also just long-term as we get into a crux of the Eagles' schedule. Where is Cam Jurgens health-wise? Good news health-wise, A.J. Brown's back. Poor Diana Rossini, I don't know what she's going to do with her time now. There's a lot of excellent shows on Netflix, the new season of Stranger Things. The full collection of Halloween movies still are on HBO Max if you have time, because she has plenty of it now that you cannot do A.J. Brown trade rumors. He was not traded from the Eagles. Surprisingly, no national media figure brought up the fact that if the Eagles had traded A.J. Brown, they would have had a dead cap hit of over $50 million for a team that is fighting tooth and nail for every penny to keep a very talented nucleus together and pay those guys. So nobody really had a solution when they came up with all these A.J. Brown trade rumors about what they were going to do with the $50 million dead cap it would create for him. He is still here, and he said today he is healthy and he is playing in the game after recovering from the hamstring. Last time we saw him on a field against the Packers, he absolutely dominated. If you remember, they start that second half with a 70-yard bomb to A.J. Brown for a touchdown, and you felt very good about that Eagles offense there in Brazil. Couldn't be more drastic conditions. A slippery field in warm Brazil, and now you're going to be on a frozen tundra in Lambeau in the middle of Wisconsin. You're the two extremes when it comes to these two games against each other. So I'll be interested to see how they get him involved, considering last time you did see him out on the field, the deep shots that they took to him were so beautiful. Anytime they got one-on-one coverage, anytime the Vikings brought a blitz, especially late game, the Eagles just went up top. They're like, you know what, one-on-one, throw it to AJ, which you love to see. I wonder how that goes against the Packers. You figure to be getting a lot of pressure from them as well. So it'll be good to have AJ Brown back. They're more talented, the more talent that you have on the field. I know that sounds simple. I know that sounds stupid, but that is the name of the game. On the other side of the ball for the Packers, this is one thing that I'm keeping an eye on. Josh Jacobs has been awesome. He continues to be. I feel like when he left the Raiders, all of us expected, maybe it's just fantasy people, us fantasy football guys, but I think we all expected him to fall off a little bit. He has not. They've been pretty successful in running the ball. They don't really have a receiving core that really threatens you. And they got Christian Watson, back a week ago. And he's their real deep threat, but he's one game back from a torn ACL, still finding his footing. And Romeo Doubs has had a good season. They just don't threaten you over the top the way that modern NFL teams do. And they don't have a lot of space separators either. And now there's even more pressure on those guys because Tucker Kraft, who is having a phenomenal season, tore his ACL this past week against Carolina. He had been really the focal point of that offense because he was so good after the catch. So now I'm a little curious what they turn to. Who's the focal point? Because there really hasn't been a time where you've felt really comfortable and confident in any of those receivers. But now you almost have to be, because if not, if there's no deep threat, if there's no threat for constant separation from these guys, you really can load up on Josh Jacobs. And the other thing was the Jordan Love decision making, where it's hard to figure. He goes 20 straight receptions against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which was incredible. One of the best halves of offense that I've seen in terms of efficiency. They were so good, so locked in that second half at Pittsburgh. And then you come home the next week, and some of the decisions that you saw on the field as a fan base in a city that saw Carson Wentz in his anti-prime of insane decisions that were head-scratching, would put it nicely, Jordan Love was rivaling that at sometimes, especially last week. He has a play against the Panthers where he roams 10 yards out of the pocket and then launches it across his body, across the field in the air. And they pan the camera, and there's no Packers players in the frame of the television. It's only a Panthers player. Thankfully, he had one of the worst drops of all. Everything about it was SportsCenter, not top 10. He drops it. But then he came back and had another interception that I have no idea where he was going with the ball. He kind of just launches it into double coverage, and double coverage is putting it nicely because it's two Panthers defenders behind the Packers receiver that was barely in the frame again. So that decision-making to me is so key beyond just the Eagles. And this again goes back to maybe the Packers. Like, do you have what it takes to go from playoff appearance to Super Bowl appearance? The 20 straight receptions, perfectly efficient in the half, to what the hell are you doing type of plays. It's so drastic that when they come together, sugar, spice, and everything nice in a pot, what are the Eagles going to get on Monday night? And that's yet to be seen. So we'll keep an eye on that. And I think it's very important because now they don't have Tucker Kraft as well. So again, awesome game. Can't wait for it. If you have YouTube TV like I do, figure it out. I don't know if I've done this rant on every social media platform, but it is crazy to me. How is this on us, the consumer, right? So in Philadelphia, if anybody could comment what we do we somehow get this locally on another channel so that we could watch this game? Or do we have to find somewhere else to watch this game if you have YouTube TV? But I could be done with YouTube TV. I could be done with Disney. I could be done with ESPN. I think it's insanely frustrating for them to be flooding us with commercials before it went off the air, and now with tweets being like, YouTube TV customers, you could lose ESPN if you don't act. Why do I have to act? I already paid you guys for the service. You guys figure it out. I host an amateur podcast about football. How am I supposed to figure this out and negotiate this for you two billion-dollar companies, Disney and Google? I know neither of you are hurting like the consumers are hurting. By the way, YouTube TV is already up 3 price hikes. Are we going to go down a price hike now that we've lost all of our sports channels like ESPN and even ABC so we could watch college football and Monday Night Football and everything in between? Still waiting to hear about that. But us, me, I figure it out. Me keep my networks. You keep my networks. Why am I going to keepmynetworks.com and signing some petition like we're building a new library in town? We're not. You go to your keepmynetworks.com. You sign the petition. Google and Disney and ESPN. You figure it out. I don't know what you want me to do. I host a podcast. That's it. You guys are a conglomerate of billions of dollars. I don't know why this continues to be a deal, but we'll see if it's figured itself out by Monday night at 8:15. And guess what? It better. Around the NFL, because it'll be on Fox and CBS, and we can actually watch it if it's on YouTube TV. Not the craziest week. We don't really have any games that are of the caliber of last week, where we had another game of the year situation with the Chiefs and the Bills. Bills did it again. We touched on it when we previewed last week, but they win in the regular season against Kansas City. And I don't know how much it means, because then we just get to the end of the season and I don't know. The Sunday Night Football is a very interesting game because it's Steelers Chargers, and I think that's two teams that we're still trying to feel out as to whether they would be contenders or not. For the Chargers, I think that's more health related if they're going to be contenders. I think if they were healthy, you'd feel pretty good about them, but they just aren't healthy, especially on that offensive line, playing a Steelers team that just lost to this Packers team, but then they came back and beat a really good Colts team. Rams 49ers, the 4:00 game, that does feel like it could have considerations in who wins the NFC West, which is no slight to the Seahawks, because, man, I thought the one thing when we did the preview show last week, I was like, I am worried about the Commanders. I don't think they have it this year. I just don't think there's any rhythm to anything that they're doing, and they're constantly unhealthy. But I thought the Seahawks might get their best shot as just like a season-saving, one last go for it. The little engine that could is going to try one last guff to get up the hill. They did not get that at all. The Seahawks absolutely obliterated them. They were so good in every phase of the game. Sam Darnold didn't have an incompletion at halftime. Jackson Smith and Jigba had over 100 yards receiving at halftime. They had a incredible special teams turnover. They executed a 2-minute drill to perfection. Like, they did everything so correctly last week. It's hard not to see them as contenders right now. And I know how it ended last year with Sam Darnold on the Vikings, but it feels like a really talented Seahawks team around him. So that's one to keep an eye on. They play the Cardinals, who are starting Jacoby Brissett for the second time, but first time as the full-time starter. So that makes it for an interesting game. Only other game I can think of is Lions Commanders, where I said this last week about the Commanders. Now I'm really doubling down, but man, is it getting late early. And they're not going to have Jaden Daniels. They're not going to have Terry McLaurin. What happens going up against this Lions team? We'll see if they've got one last gasp, but it does not feel that way. On to the trade deadline. Really interesting trade deadline this year. We'll just quickly do some grades. We'll start Eagles because this is an Eagles show. I would say the Jalen Phillips move is an absolute B+. Now, it's hard to give it an A because right now he is considered a rental. They don't have a long-term extension in place for him. And this is somebody who has torn his Achilles multiple times. So you have injury risk for a short-term player. That it's hard to give an A to that. But aside, I liked everything else about that move. One, I don't have to go too much into it because we already did in the show, but addressing that need at the edge rusher. You've never felt better about that position than you do right now this season because they brought Jalen Phillips in. I really like that. And you're giving up the lesser of your 2 third-round picks to do so, and you still have a full stock cupboard when it comes April. And when you're in Pittsburgh, the Eagles are still going to be on the board. They're still going to be on the draft board every single round. They still have 8 picks, even after some wheeling and dealing to bring in pieces this year. So I don't feel like they sacrificed their future in any way to bring in a player that would help them right now to repeat. So for that, I give it a B+. One that I do give an A, the Colts getting Sauce Gardner. I think there's mixed opinions on Sauce Gardner, at least in the past year and a half. But for a team like the Colts, who have been directionless since Andrew Luck retired, now they feel like a contender. They feel like they're running away with the division. They have incredible infrastructure on that offensive line ahead of Jonathan Taylor, who is having a historic season. And now you add Sauce Gardner to the defense. For Daniel Jones, do I think he could beat Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes in a playoff game? I don't know. But if you surround him by elite talent, I certainly feel a lot better about the aspect of him being able to do it if everyone around him is supremely talented. So I thought that was an A for them to go out and get Sauce Gardner. I just thought that was an awesome move. Another one for the Jaguars. This feels simple, but it's easy B- to get Jacoby Myers, where they really didn't sacrifice anything. It became a position of need because Travis Hunter went on IR. Myers' time in Las Vegas was clearly over, so they get out and they get somebody valuable at that position to help Trevor Lawrence and see if they can get back into that thing in the AFC South. So I thought that was a very solid deal to make it the deadline. Made a lot of sense for that Jacksonville team. The last one, I think, aside from Cowboys, the DC4L Cowboys fans, I think everybody else is agreeing with this, but the Cowboys getting Quinn Williams, to me, is a C-. the Cowboys, again, to me, this isn't an Eagles fan speaking. It's just like how I would build a team if I were in charge. And to me, they feel like such a rudderless ship at sometimes because they trade Micah Parsons, elite defensive player, because they didn't want to be top heavy in their salary cap contractions. They load up with the draft capital that they get with him. So now they're built for the future because they even tell you themselves in press conferences with Jerry Jones, they did not feel like they were one defensive player away from competing. Okay, fine. I didn't necessarily agree to give up elite talent, but I do see that viewpoint that if you're not one player away, load up to see if you can get more players. You then go 3-5-1. The defense does not look good in any aspect. So I guess you are correct. You were not one player away. And at times they feel like they're 11 players away on defense. They crater out on Monday Night Football against the Arizona Cardinals. And then you trade your draft capital for Quinnen Williams, a defensive player that is a top-heavy salary cap contraction. And it's just one defensive player when you just told me you weren't one defensive player away. So what do you want to be? Are you doing this for now? Are you doing this for later? You have 3 defensive tackles making over $20 million a year. And I know, I can say it as an Eagles fan, you can always restructure. You can always move money around. There is always money in the banana stand. But to me, it's more of the direction. Like, I don't understand what you want to be. Because is this move helping you win now when you yourself told me you weren't one defensive player away and you were already 3-5-1? And if you bring in Quinnen Williams with this and you give up some of your draft capital that you got from Micah Parsons, what's the point? Just keep Micah Parsons at that point. So I think they have a lot of wheeling and dealing that they have left to do. And I know part of it is just you have to be able to draft better, but it just doesn't feel to me like a front office who is assured in what they want to do and what they want to be, both short-term and long-term. And I think that would frustrate me if I was a fan of that franchise. So that was a C- to me. But we'll see how it plays out, and I'm sure we'll get a ton of comments on the video when he has 3 tackles for loss against Saquon and the Eagles. That's how it always goes anytime we stake a claim like that one. But all in all, I think it was a pretty hectic trade deadline. Good for the league. I thought it shapeshifted some players into some contenders, and we'll see what comes of it. But for now, we'll sign off. 30 minutes almost on the dot. Great to be here again with you. Great to be previewing some NFL football. We had a bye week. I really missed these guys. Previewing the whole NFL is fun, but I want to talk about my Eagles too. We'll see how it plays out in Green Bay on Monday night. We'll see if you have YouTube TV, if you're able to watch the game as well. And we'll be back to talk about everything that occurs in that game and look forward to a very, very interesting November on the schedule for the Eagles. And I've been teasing, and we're pretty close. We've got a very special announcement for that Eagles-Cowboys game coming up in here in a few weeks. We're about ready to debut that for everybody. Can't wait. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Chris Hansen here, and I'm going to need you all to take a seat right over there and check out Birds versus Boys.
I think you're completely right here, and I hate it.
Yep. Hey, idiots. Stop doing dumb things. I got 2 phones. Upset alert. Upset alert. I might go insane.
I think you're already there.
There's no hope. Hope is gone. If this was an AFC North podcast, we'd be done in 15 minutes. Bob Hope. I'm going to drink bleach. That is
the team you promised me you were going to be this year.
This is the Consciously Hopeful podcast.
I'll be watching.